Hello, everybody. I am Catherine Chase, Executive Director of the Cayuga Lake Wine Trail, and I'm so happy that you're here with us for our first ever Wine of the Month Zoom tasting. Today, we'll be featuring 6 different dessert-style wines, all from Montezuma, Swedish Hill and Goose, Buttonwood Grove, Toro, and Hosmer Wineries. Just a quick note before we begin, most of the wineries are still offering tastings, and curbside pickup is available at all of the open wineries. Many places are even having great online sales, so be sure to check out their website and Facebook pages. The wineries featured here today are also offering promos on the wines that they are showcasing, some online and some in store. Now to begin, let's meet Julia from Hosmer.
Hi, I'm Julia Hoyle. I'm the winemaker for Hosmer Winery. So the Hosmer family, as a little bit of history, has been growing grapes since the early 70s. Started out primarily with hybrid and then got into vinifera in the 80s. And some of the newest trials are Gruner and Sauvignon Blanc from sort of 2013, 2014. Today, I have our Riesling Ice Wine. It's kind of hard to see on my screen. And it is a traditional ice wine. So in 2019, it was a relatively, I would say, large Riesling crop. And vintages like that, it gives you a lot of leeway to try all new things because you have a couple extra tons here and there. And Tim Hosmer and I decided, you know what? If we get the right weather, let's do an ice wine. And mid-November or so, I was looking at the 10-day forecast and I saw this dip that went down to about 15 degrees. For about 6 hours. I thought, let's do it. And we planned ahead and everyone was on board. We had an intern from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, who'd never seen the snow before, help us pick. And we all got out there sort of first thing. And we just kind of went for it. And we got about a ton of fruit. We pressed it off, came off about 33 bricks. So if you're following Canadian law, it's not a Canadian ice wine, but if you follow German law, it is an ice wine. Just kind of let it tick along in its ferment and rolled the tank outside and it was done. Mother Nature cooled it off because it was such a small volume. And we bottled it up in the spring of 2020. So there you go.
Thank you so much. Next, I'd love to hear from Derek. He is featuring Swedish Hill and Goose.
Good morning, Catherine. How are you?
Good.
Nice to be here. Hi, I'm Derek Wilbur. I'm senior winemaker at Swedish Hill, along with our sister winery, Goose, which is also located on Cayuga Lake. My colleague, Zach Pegram, was supposed to be here as well, our other winemaker, but unfortunately he has a small child that's not feeling well. So I'm going to fill in for both of us. So it's sort of similar to what Julia was talking about. Swedish Hill's been making wine for over 30 years. I've also been making wine in the Finger Lakes for close to 38 years. As we were getting ready to do this presentation, I had to look back on our notes. The older I get, the less I can keep this stuff in my head. So our Cynthia Marie Port is actually named after one of our founders, Cynthia Peterson. This is a wine that we make periodically. We don't bottle it all that often. This actually, the bottle that we've tried here was actually bottled in 2013. Both our port and the sherry that we'll talk about in a little bit for our Goose Winery, both these wines are made in a very similar fashion. They're aged in small oak barrels. We also do what's called the modified Solera system. And that part of the blend consistency of these things is we never bottle all that's in a particular barrel when we do bottle this stuff. Typically, we take about 50% of the wine out of each barrel. We'll blend some newer stock in with that to, in the case of our port, to pop up the fruit a little bit. Then we make new base wines that can go back into those barrels. This particular bottle, as I was taking a look at our records, about 50% of this actually was from the 2009 vintage. So these aren't really ruby ports in the classic sense of overly fruity initially, but they have a lot of dried fruit characters, a lot of what I would call vanilla character. Both these wines are also aged in American oak. So they're not as fruit forward. They tend to be a little bit rounder and more in a finished fashion of a traditional aged port. Both of them, in the case of the port, it's around 9% residual sugar, 18% alcohol. great with bitter chocolates and nuts and things of that nature. So it's a wine for the ages. It holds up extremely well. We're actually looking at probably bottling a new production of this port this year or next. So something that's not done very often, but they tend to hold up very, very well.
Cool, thank you. You can just tell us about your sherry while you're at it.
Sure. So on to the next. So again, similar to the port, sherry's a little different in that from a winemaking perspective, you're basically doing everything wrong to a white wine. In other words, this is a wine that is fortified. Again, there's actually grape spirits are added to get the alcohol above 18%. And sherries are actually oxidized white wines. And that's exactly opposite to what you would do with a traditional table wine. It tends to produce as a result some dark amber colors. It tends to have a lot of very nutty and vanilla characters to it. Again, this is a wine that we currently have around 600 to 700 gallons of sherry stock in small 60-gallon oak barrels. When we do bottle this particular wine, again, we'll pull about 50% out of those barrels, blend that up a little bit, bottle it, and then new stock goes back in. As I took a look at our notes, one of the advantages of the computer age is that our computer records go back quite a long ways. Actually, about 3 to 5% of this particular bottling was actually made from wines in 2003. And so that aging effect gives it this very unique character. And this is one of these wines that's more about process than it is about the base wines that go into it. This is mainly native varieties. Catawba and Niagara are two of the fundamental parts of this, along with Concord. But those fruit characters are less important than the aging process. The time in small barrels, the slow oxidation that goes on over time are more important to the types of characters you get from this style of fortified wine than you would from a table wine, for example. This is one of my favorites, particularly this time of year when the temperatures get below 20 degrees. It's great to have a small glass of sherry. I always tell people when I first got into the business, I worked with my father in the vineyard, and we'd come home after being outside all day in the wintertime, have a small glass of sherry by the fire, and we'd both be asleep by 8 o'clock at night. So this is very much a wintertime type of product. Both our sherry and our Cynthium port, we do have some specials on there. And Catherine was good to remind us of that. So the port is normally about $24 a bottle, but we currently have a special 2 for $32 on this one. And the sherry, which is done in the smaller bottles, its regular price is $16 for a half bottle, but currently we have a 30% off if you buy 6 bottles of this as well. So they're great wines for the wintertime.
Perfect for a nightcap too, sounds like.
That's true.
Phil, let's hear about Montezuma and your Pear Ice Wine.
Thanks, Catherine. My name's Phil Plummer. I'm the winemaker at Montezuma Winery. I've been with the company almost 11 years now. I've been the winemaker since 2013, and we are actually celebrating our 20th anniversary this year. So that's pretty cool. Today, I'm going to share our ice pear wine. If you know much about us, you know that we take kind of an unconventional approach to winemaking. The Martin family, the owners of the winery, they started as commercial beekeepers, and then they moved into meads and fruit wines before getting into grape wines. So the directionality of what we've done is a little bit different than most people in the Finger Lakes. So we have this broad array of fruit and honey wines, as well as the grape wines that you might find at most of our neighbors. So this ice pear wine is made in the same principle goes into it as a traditional ice wine, except we're not freezing the pears on the trees and then pressing them frozen. If you've ever pressed pears before, it's not pleasant when they're just ripe and not frozen. So I can't even imagine what it would be like if we had to try and freeze them and press them out. So we got this as juice. It's 100% Bosc pear. We froze the tanks of juice, and then we drip them off, and the same chemical properties that make ice wine work make this work. When you freeze and thaw things, it's a chemical separation where you're removing water and you're concentrating everything else. So we get this really concentrated juice that we can ferment down and leave with some residual sugar. And with fruit wines, it's nice to do them this way because sometimes they can be really straightforward in one note if they're just standard table fruit wines. But with things like pears, where you get some really cool floral and spice things going on, that concentration helps to bring those out, and it makes for a really, really interesting final product. So it's not quite so sweet as a nice grape wine. Part of the balance with fruit wines too is that you're not dealing, sometimes you're dealing with way more acid than you would have in a grape wine, and other times, like with pome fruits like apples and pears, not even nearly as much. So a little less sugar in this one because we're trying to balance that lighter acid profile. But we've bottled this, I think, back in 2019, and it does really well for us, and it's just really interesting fruit wine.
Thank you. It sounds like it would go great with ice cream.
Yeah, I think ice cream, blue cheese, all the classic ice wine stuff.
Well, thank you so much.
Sure.
All right. Let's hear from Sue and Diana. They are talking for Toro Run and Buttonwood Grove wineries.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sue. Today, talking about Buttonwood's Ice Wine, which was the first one that I had ever made in 2017. Much like everyone else's process, it was a lucky day. It got really cold. We were able to actually do it in the late afternoon or early evening for the picking, so we didn't have to do that ungodly hour of 3 a.m. We're hoping that maybe later this week we will actually pick another one. We have some grapes out. There are a few left. The critters have kind of helped themselves to a few of our grapes out there, but you know, this might be the time when we can get it and actually make a little more. So as everybody's kind of talked about the processes, we want to talk more about what you might pair with it, when you might use it, just so that our customers have an idea, because that's what we do when we invite you into our tasting room, which is our background.
Yeah, so Sue is our winemaker here at Buttonwood Grove, and I am the tasting room manager for those of you who haven't met me, and for our guests watching. And you know, one of the things that we really encourage folks is that pungent cheeses go really nicely with this ice wine. So this ice wine, honey mead and florals to it, and it is very syrupy. So blue cheese, we have Miranda's, or I'm sorry, Lively Run's Goat Blue here, and paired with this, it's fantastic. And then we also, I did this over a vanilla bean gelato last New Year's. Poured it right over the ice cream with a little Pizelli almond cookie, and it was absolutely fabulous. So definitely can go sweet with sweet, or you can get something really pungent. Cha-ching, cha-ching. It's really good. It's very tasty. So this is a 100% Riesling grape in our Buttonwood Ice Wine. Anything else you want to share about that?
No, I think we'll move on and kind of begin to show some of the differences. I don't know if it's easy to see in this video or not.
Yeah, you got it.
But the color in these two wines is drastically different. So the late harvest is very golden in color.
The ice wine.
Ice wine, I'm sorry. And the late harvest is very light and clear. Very different style that was made from the late harvest.
So the Toro Run Late Harvest, obviously we just recently purchased Toro over the course of the last year, so we were not responsible for making this. So I can't go deep into the process of the winemaking itself, but can let you know that this fruit was hand harvested in November of 2018, late November. And again, those just like with the ice wine, those grapes are left on the vine to become very raisiny, very dry. Did have some botrytis, which for guests maybe watching this who aren't familiar with what that is, it's also sometimes called noble rot, but it's a type of fungus that causes that fruit to become dehydrated and really concentrated. So our the late harvest Riesling, both the same fruit, but very different presentation. I notice a lot more of the citrus still lives in this late harvest as opposed to the honey and florals that come out of our ice wine. The late harvest isn't quite as syrupy. Still definitely a sweet wine, but one that has a little less of that syrupy, heavy vibe to it. And I could almost drink a little bit more of this, I think. So similar process, but this did not have to be frozen solid on the vine the way our ice wines do. And like a little bit of nuttiness. I definitely started picking that up as it warmed up a little bit. When it was super chilled, I wasn't getting that, but could similarly pair this with pungent cheeses or even a creamy cheese, though you could, or you could do it with similar sweetnesses. So yeah, I think that's about all I got. Our specials on these, we are down to only $10 a bottle on our late harvest at Toro Run. Here at Buttonwood, we're featuring our ice wine as a complimentary taste for every taster who comes into our storefront throughout the month of January. And then 15% discount on 3 or more bottles of the ice wine. And at Toro, you can taste this as well as a complimentary taste with your tasting during the month of January. And then $10 a bottle, can't beat that. So
come see us.
Yeah, come on out and see us.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you everyone for taking the time out of your day and telling us about your delicious wines and giving us some great insight on the different styles of dessert wine. I know it's a pretty vague term and there's a lot to it. So hopefully this helped out. The viewers also, thank you for following along as we virtually bring you wine each month. Don't forget to snag the dessert style deals while they last for the last few days of the month. Visit CayugaWineTrail.com for a full list and stay tuned for sparkling wine Zoom tasting next month. Woohoo! Woohoo!